And this week, we are going to expand on that and go into another subject. Very, very important subject. It's a strange thing, and there are certain reasons for it, but what we're about to discuss tonight is generally not part of the mental furniture of most people who are involved in Hashkafa. And for some reason, this information has not really been known to most people. And it's problematic why that is. But it probably remains as one of the most critical pieces of all Hashkafa. And what it really is, it has to do with the relationship of the Neshama and the Guf itself. Okay, what is the problem? What is the problem of the entire situation? Two problems. There is a certain type of mitzvah, there is a certain type of belief called Chiyas HaMesim. Now I don't know how many of you people are familiar with that, but it is a certain kind of belief that's one of the most important beliefs in the world of Yiddishkeit. What is Chiyas HaMesim really? What exactly is it? Chiyas HaMesim is the belief that what? It's the belief, but it's more than just you believe it. It is an accepted dogma in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism. The Rambam says that the belief in Chiyas HaMesim is a fundamental dogma of Judaism. Not to believe in Chiyas HaMesim is not to believe in one of the key principles of Yiddishkeit itself. What is Chiyas HaMesim? It is basically the following. We are all born, and there comes a time when we all must die. Whatever the span of years between the two, this is an inevitability. To be human is to be born and to die. That's what it means to be human. To be alive is to be born and to die, in whatever situation it is. The Torah tells us an amazing thing, that there will come a time when all the dead shall arise. That's called the resurrection of the dead, or in Hebrew, Chiyas HaMesim. Chiyah means the resurrection, or the awakening, or the revivification. HaMesim means the dead. What is it saying? It says that there will come a time, in the near future probably, when dying will cease, number one, and number two, all those who have already died will revive themselves and get up and become full, conscious, living beings again. What does that mean for us? You will see all those people who you once knew who are no longer alive. We will see those people who once lived a long time ago. We will see Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We will see Moshe Rabbeinu. We will see all those people who are in the Chumash. We will see those people who are in the Gemara. We will see all the Amoraim. We will see the Rishonim. You will say hello to Rashi. You will say hello to the Vilna Gaon. You will say hello to the Baal Shem Tov. And you will also say, please. You will also say hello to Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto. You will say hello to all these people. And hopefully they will say hello back. I cannot guarantee that. But for your ability to say hello to them is without question. That's called Chiyas HaMesim. Now that sounds incredible. That really does. I mean, that really sounds like something. That sounds like some gift of eternity. Can God do it? That's an absurd question. If God can create the body the first time around and give it life and raise up a person from the dust to become a full human being, why can't the person do it the second time around? Or third time around? Or 1,000 times around? What's the difference if you do it once, if you do it 1,000 times? Will God do it again? That's what the Torah says. The Baruch says, yes, I am going to do it again. A second time. And when it happens the second time, there will no longer be any death. Death will cease from the world. Well, for all you pessimists, this is a very high optimistic note. Because it means there is some kind of salvation for mankind. Well, what's wrong with believing in that? A belief? Okay. The Torah says that I believe in that. That's fine. What's the problem? Because the truth of the matter is it's a very serious problem. Because it makes absolutely no sense. Fine. It sounds great. And I know that God can do it, and the Torah says that He will do it. But it makes no sense for Him to do it. Why not? Because who wants to come back as a living body? Who wants to come back? And why do we have to come back as a living body? It's hard for you to appreciate this question because none of us want to leave. Nobody wants to die, you see. So with that same particular instinct we say, of course, if I have to die and I have a chance to come back, of course. But you don't realize what it means to be born. You don't know what it is for that neshama to come down to a good. You have no idea because you don't remember. Let me refresh your memory. Okay? What happened before the neshama went down to a good? The neshama was a pure spiritual being. It was pure spirit. It's able to appreciate the yichud of the Baruch Shalom. It's able to perceive God's unity in a way which gives it great ecstasy. True, it's got a problem with it. It's uncomfortable in that perception, but it's able to do it. You see, there's no mask between it and God. It sees what it sees clearly. The Baruch Shalom says, hey, I am going to do something for you, and I want you to embark on a new journey. The neshama says, what? What journey? So the Baruch Shalom says, I want you to go down into the world of the physical. Because that is the only place where you're going to remove this discomfort that you have when you are involved in the perception of me and in the perception of this absolute good. So the neshama thinks for a second and says, no way. I don't want this. What is this physical? So the Baruch Shalom says, look. And he shows the neshama this physical universe, and the neshama is totally horrified. Why is the neshama horrified? If I told you right now that I have good news, I'm going to lock you up in jail for 50 years, would you make a simcha? Would you? No. Why not? What's wrong with being there for the next 50 years? What do you object about? So you say, what do you mean you object about? I have certain needs. I have emotional needs. I have physical needs. How am I going to fulfill these needs sitting in a jail for 50 years? I'll go absolutely mad. That's what you'll say. Jail, which is a situation completely inconsistent with my nature, would be nothing more than torture, right? That's exactly what the neshama says. How can you put me down into this case and make me into a mummy? While I'm in the group, I no longer will come in contact with spirituality. I no longer will see what I see now. I will no longer have an expansive view of an astounding part of what the true nature of reality is. I will be confined to 5 senses. I will only see a narrow vision, a tunnel vision of what I see now. Not only that, I will not be able to experience the true simcha and joy that I experience now. It is true that I have a certain amount of discomfort, and that discomfort is called nam diktufa. But better this discomfort than what? Than losing the entire ability itself. Who wants to go down into a pit, into a dungeon? And the neshama screams because it does not want to go down. But the Baruch Shalom says you must go down. Ba'al kocho aton neilad. Perforce you are born. You have no choice. What does it mean, perforce you are born? It means you must go in your state into another type of state, which literally constitutes a dungeon for you. It must be done. Because I want you to be able to enjoy what I have in store for you with a perfect ability. Not with a semi-perfect ability. And therefore, before you can go up, you must first go down. if that's what the neshama feels like when it's about to descend into a guf, who in their right mind would want to do it again? Isn't that what Kriyas HaMesim is? Kriyas HaMesim is a repetition of an original horror. And the Baruch Shem says, be happy. You're going to come down again. So what is the Torah talking about? What is this belief called Kriyas HaMesim? And I'll say better to you. The Gemara says, the Rambam says clearly, that if you don't believe in Kriyas HaMesim, if you do not believe that you're going to come back, right? You are not going to come back. That's what the Rambam says. To those who fail to believe in Kriyas HaMesim, they will not experience Kriyas HaMesim. You see. But the way we understand it, good. Who wants it? Once I'm dead and I'm a neshama by itself, no way do I want to come back down to this prison. That's teva I can do without. That's the first problem. What is the sense of Kriyas HaMesim? Second problem. What is the function of coming down to the guf? Why does the neshama come down to the guf in the first place? Well, if you remember from last week, we saw a very profound purpose to the guf. Remember, what did the Baruch Shem wanted to do? The Baruch Shem wanted the neshama to work for its perception of divinity by choosing between apparent divinity and real divinity. So what did the Baruch Shem do? The Baruch Shem took the neshama, right, and chopped away a piece of it and made it mechutza. He put it to a state of kasor, didn't he? And he said, now that you have this missing part, you are going to feel empty. Because the Baruch Shem took away part of the light and the power of the neshama. Once it feels empty, it now has a drive. What? To reestablish itself into what's called shleimus, to go back to what it was before. But the neshama is confused. It does not clearly know how to go back. So the Baruch Shem gives it two options, right? He gives it option 1 and option 2. Option A is what? By doing mitzvahs, by connecting to real divinity, and what that does is replenish that missing part by giving it real substance again. But then there's option B, you see. What's option B? Option B is the pursuit of what's called apparent divinity. What is apparent divinity, if you remember? It is the pursuit in the belief that the neshama itself is God in some way. How do you do that? How do we manage to give it a what? An apparent divinity? Through the guf, through the body. It was the body that gave us the means of this particular type of deception. How does the body do it? Because number 1, when the neshama is in the body, there is no more real perception of divinity. God has withdrawn. He has hidden himself from the world. The world is now in the world of the physical. There are 5 senses. Spirituality, ruchnius, is no longer visible. In that body, the person no longer is cognizant of his origin, or what the neshama is. Also, the body provides the what? The wherewithal of the Yetzer Hara to attempt to fool a person. Because what the Yetzer Hara does is translate all Kedusha into body Kedusha, what we call the hidden yichud, if you remember. Remember that? Pleasure, power, performance, recognition. But these are all types of what? These are types of ways that a person could replenish his being in a deceptive way, where a person in the world of the body can really believe in his own divinity. But in order to do that, you've got to have a body. The Yetzer Hara cannot go over to the neshama and say, believe in yourself as if you were a god. That's absurd. That's impossible. Because the neshama is in too direct contact with God to fall for that kind of illusion. It's impossible. So what does the Yetzer Hara do? The Yetzer Hara needs a withdrawal from the Baruch Shem. He needs some aspect where God has hid himself, where there is no spirituality. And from that medium, the Yetzer Hara will attempt to take the Kedusha and distort it, so that the person can really think that in some way he has the control and he has some kind of real existence, independent of God. That is the function of the guf. That is the function of the body. It hides God, and it gives also the Banasham a certain way to fuse or to input its power in a way which leads to deception. When I feel the pleasures of my body, I don't feel the kedusha or the spirituality behind that pleasure. I don't feel that at all. Well, I feel its pleasure, but I feel its pleasure which comes from me, and which is a statement of myself. It says something about who I am. It says that I have a body, and I have the ability to experience pleasure, and I have the ability to experience myself independently from anything else. Because I am my body. You see. Even though the source of all pleasure is Kedusha, and behind the ability of the body to experience pleasure is Kedusha itself, but the body is constructed in such a way where that Kedusha is not visible. Hence the origin of that Kedusha is no longer there. So a person can experience the result of that Kedusha and think that it's his own. That is the function of the body. The function of the body is to provide a vehicle for the absence of God, and a vehicle for what? Also for the apparent absence of Kedusha. Now in both cases, God and Kedusha exist, but the body allows the person to think that they don't exist. That there is no spirit, that there is no God, and that pleasure comes from the body itself, disconnected from God. What then is the ultimate purpose of the body? Without the body there would be no free will. There would be no bechira. There would be no free will. Why not? Because you cannot have free will unless you have a choice. In order to have a choice, you must have two possibilities, or two options. The body gives us the second option to the spirit. Without the body, there would be no second option. There would be the Ribbono Shel Olam and the Ribbono Shel Olam. That's all. There are no two options. The body gives us the ability of that second option. So what therefore is the essence of the body? The essence of the body, the essence of the entire physical universe is to create a place, which provides an alternative to God. That is the crystal definition and the function of what the entire physical universe is. It does that through the mechanism of Hester, or the mechanism of withdrawal, where God and Kedusha withdraw and come back in a form which is no longer visible. Why? So that you can choose apparent divinity, which of course is a false divinity. Now why does God want this entire thing? As we said before, because the Buddha wants you to earn your Olam Haba on your own, not by something He gives you. Do we see the complete structure? So, according to that, what is the essential function of the body? To provide an alternative. That's it. If that's its function, then a person is born, he goes into a body, his neshama goes to a body, he survives for X number of years, he does what he does, either he pursues real divinity or pursues apparent divinity, and then after that it's over. You don't need the body anymore, right? Because then the neshama has to go up to what? To the Beis Hamikdash, to the high court up there, and he has to be judged. To what? To what extent did you pursue real divinity? To what extent did you pursue apparent divinity? And on the basis of that judgment, that will determine its course in the future. And that's it. What is the course in the future? Olam Haba, which is a place that the neshama will go and in some way relate to whatever is constructed. If it pursues real divinity, it will enjoy the perception of real divinity. If it pursues apparent divinity, it will enjoy the perception of that, which is nothing. But that's the choice. You need a body? No. So the second question that we must ask is this. Even if the body were not a prison of the neshama, even if it did not constitute a pain of the neshama, what would be its purpose? For the neshama to come back down into the body. There would be no purpose for such a thing. Because the body is only existence, it only has an importance as long as the necessity for free choice exists. As long as God wants to know what the neshama will do. Once God knows that answer, once the person knows that answer, the guf is no longer necessary. So the question comes back, what is the purpose of Tchiyas HaMesim? Why does the neshama have to go back down into the body for a second time? Not only is it what? Painful, but it is also what? Redundant. It's also unnecessary. It's useless. It's futile. It's irrelevant. Are there any questions? Yes. It's hot in here. It's hot in here? Yeah, any suggestions? There is no such thing as pleasure. There is no such thing as beauty if in some way it is not connected to the unity of God. You hear what I said? Yes. You hear what I said? It's very important to understand it. When the Virgin created the world and he created existence, he used his absolute unity as the measure of creation. What that means is that nothing can be experienced outside of that principle in which he constructed the world. The perception, the experience of all pleasure, in whatever form you experience it, must in some way relate to the perception of the unity of the Bnei Shalom through Kedusha. There is no other way to experience pleasure. There is no other way. That's a myth. It is a deception. What the Bnei Shalom did was provide for two possibilities. One possibility is the perception of that yichud directly. In doing that, it means you're able to relate to that yichud in a spiritual fashion. And in that case, you receive or you experience the pleasure, but at the same time, they provide also a clear perception of the origin of that pleasure, who is God Himself. But there is another way to experience that pleasure. When the Buddhism created the physical world, what He created in essence, and you think about this, is simply another way of His yichud to manifest itself in such a way where it is no longer obvious where that pleasure comes from. That's the only difference between the physical and the spiritual. Again, there is no difference between the physical universe and the spiritual universe, except in one main criteria. In the spiritual universe, when you experience pleasure, you not only experience it, but you know where it's coming from. Because you experience the pleasure directly from its source, which is Kedusha and the Bnei Shalom. When you are in the physical universe, in your body, you experience also pleasure. But what happens is that pleasure is disconnected from its source. So you are able to experience pleasure without knowing where it comes from. You're able to experience pleasure without realizing that it comes from the Bnei Shalom and it's based on His yichud. You see the difference? In other words, the difference is not in what? In the mechanism of the pleasure. It is exactly the same. Both are contingent on the Kedusha of the Bnei Shalom. The difference is in the perception of the origin of that pleasure. In one case it is obvious in the world of the Ruchnius and the Spirit. In the other case it is completely what? It is completely obscure. Why does God want to do that? Because the Bnei Shalom wants to give you a choice between the two. But the Bnei Shalom cannot change the mechanism of pleasure. He can't create a new source of pleasure as such. Rather, He doesn't create a new source. There are not two different ways to experience pleasure. He doesn't create two different sources or roots of pleasure. That doesn't exist. Because He established all of creation on the basis of the perception of Himself. There is no option. There's no other alternative. There's no other God out there. There's no other power out there that it would become an alternative source of pleasure besides God. That's not possible. What He simply did was create one source because He is one. It all comes from Him. But one source is visible and the other source is invisible. That's all. The physical universe is nothing more than what? It is the experience of Kedusha in a way which is hidden, so that the true origin of that Kedusha is no longer visible. Why? Because the Bnei Shalom wants you to have the possibility of believing that the origin is yourself, so that you would choose a parent divinity. Do you understand? That means the following. Specifically, it means that every capacity that you have to experience whether it's physical, whether it's an emotional, whether it's intellectual. The appreciation of music, the appreciation of bodily pleasure, the appreciation of what? Of eating and drinking, physical pleasures, sexual pleasures, the experience of a sunset, the experience of a landscape. All these things are really have counterparts in the world of the spirit. Every one of them. Every one of them has an exact counterpart in the world of the spirit, you see. Except that when you experience in the world of the spirit, when it's your neshama which is experiencing that, it's experiencing it with full amplification and intensity without any obscurity. So therefore, when you tell me that you're going to miss the sunset, you will not miss the sunset because you will re-experience the sunset. But you will experience it in its true form. Do we understand? You're not going to miss anything. Once this body is gone, nothing will have been taken away from you. What will simply have been given to you is the same thing, but multiplied by millions and millions of times as a factor of what the real experience is about. You cannot understand what I'm saying to you experientially. I would doubt very much if there's anyone in this room that can begin to understand on the experiential level what I'm talking about. It would take a long time to tap that. It can be done, but it would take a long time. It would take an enormous amount of information for you to really begin to understand what I'm talking about in that way. But intellectually, you can clearly understand what I'm saying. You see, your neshama, or the ability of your neshama's experience, is nothing more than a transformation of all those physical pleasures of your body. That's all it is. The physical and the spiritual relate to each other, not as what? As two different entities, comes from two different sources. Again, this is very critical to understand. The guf, which is the physical, and the neshama, which is the spiritual, right? Do not relate to two separate origins. That's not what it is. They relate to the same origin, except that they constitute what? Transformations of each other. Each one is nothing more than a variant on the other. They are two different ways of saying the same statement. Do we understand? The physical is an exact counterpart of the spiritual. It's an exact, precise counterpart of the spiritual. The only difference is in what? Is in the fact that in the guf, if it's the pleasure, the guf is broken from its origin. You see, so that there is a break in its ability to know where its pleasure comes from. But the neshama is not. There's a direct line to the origin. And because of that, the intensity of this experience, the intensity of the experience of the neshama, is vastly superior to the intensity of the experience of the body. That's why. We're dealing with variations, not with alternatives. You see, one is a transformation of the other. It is not a true alternative to the other. It's not either neshama or guf in its essence. The Baruch Hu created that because that's his choice. But what it really is, when it comes down to the inner construction, it's the same thing in a different form. I cannot overstate this principle. I cannot overstate it. It's not possible. The deeper you understand what I'm saying now, the closer you will come to true ruchnius. It takes people years and years of tremendous avodah to figure out and realize what I just told you in the last 15 minutes, intellectually. When a person actually pursues the world of the neshama, you see, when he does the mitzvahs and he withdraws from as much of the guf as possible and he tries to elevate himself, there comes a point in that avodah, in that Yiras Shamayim, when somebody says, wait a minute, what am I running away from the guf as if the guf is something totally distant from God, it's totally antagonistic to God. It is not antagonistic to God. It is another phase of divinity. But it's a phase of divinity which we should not pursue, because it is a deceptive phase of divinity. But it may have taken this person years to come to that understanding. Now, of course, that understanding is experiential, so it's very, very powerful. But I am giving you in a nutshell, in the last 15 minutes, what could take years and years of experiential knowledge to get. Because that is the essential principle. To put it in more technical terms, and we're trying to make you all people into hashkafa professionals, at least to some extent, the word is the following. Since all pleasure is based on yichud of God, on the perception of the yichud, correct? The yichud of the neshama, or the yichud of what? Of spirit, is called yichud hamizkaleh. Yichud hamizkaleh means to reveal yichud. The pleasure of the neshama, is a pleasure which is revealed in its connection to God. That's called yichud hamizkaleh. Yichud means, of course, unity. Mizgaleh comes from the word giloi, or revelation, you see. Yichud HaMizgaleh is the pleasure of the neshama. The pleasure of the group is called Yichud HaMistater. Mistater means hidden. So, if you really want to sound fancy, throw around these two words. And these two words will also give you the ability to understand what I'm saying. Guf is nothing more than Yichud HaMistater, hidden Yichud. Neshama is nothing more than Yichud HaMizgaleh, revealed Yichud. If you see it in those two different ways, you will begin to understand what the relationship is of your body to what? To the Neshama. Many times a word will contain, these two words will sum up everything I've discussed till now. Yichud HaMizgaleh, Yichud HaMistater. Both are yichud. The one is hidden and one is revealed. That automatically sets in your mind all the concepts in which I've just said. If you have a question, raise your hand first. See that guf and neshama are related as variants on the same theme. What I mean is, I haven't said yet that one could be transformed in the other. I haven't said that. What I'm simply saying is that what you see are two different, is one kedusha or one light with two different lenses. In other words, imagine if you have two different lenses. One is green colored and one is yellow colored. Behind these lenses is a light source. Now when somebody stands behind these lenses, what does he see? He sees green and he sees yellow. But the truth of the matter is, what really is the color of the light? It's white in both cases. But as far as the receiver is concerned, it represents two different colors. You see what I'm saying? That's what I mean, that one is actually, both of them are parallel, you see. The source behind both of them is the same, except that it's the lens. The group has a different lens. And because it has a different lens, it converts the light, it transforms the light into a different type of vision. You see what I'm saying? That's what I mean. But essentially it's the same light that we're seeing. That's the mashal that we're talking about. Yes, what do you want to say?
Rabbi, I wanted to say.
And for this question, we have to go back into history itself. We have asked two basic questions on the belief of Chiyas HaMesim. One, that it's painful to the neshama to return back to the book. And number two, that it's absolutely unnecessary in the way we understand the purpose of the book. The third question is something else. One of the most important ways to understand what the reason and nature of all hashkafa is to go back in history itself. Because the truth of the matter is that in certain ways the microcosm of all hashkafa, of all Torah, is represented in the situation of the first man, Adam Rishon, before the sin. The state of Adam Rishon before he sinned is the sum total of all reality at one point in time. What do I mean? You must know. Not only because it's very important for our scope to understand it, but it's one of the most powerful instruments to understand what our scope is all about. We will be using this over and over and over again. It's one of the most critical aspects or tools in which we need to understand what's really going on. There was a man who was created, the first man who was ever created. His name was Adam, and we call him Adam Rishon, the first man. Now, Adam Rishon was created in a certain condition. He was literally the first person in the sense that he represented the beginning state of what man was supposed to be about. He is the microcosm. He is the example for all men that ever followed after him. Because I will tell you a very, very important thing about Adam Rishon. It's very important to know. We know the story of Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon was told not to eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. That's what he was told, not to do that. Now, we all know what happened. He did eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, hence there was a whole series of consequences which happened because of it. But the question must remain, and always is there, what happens if Adam did not eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra? What happens if he did not sin? What happens if we go the other scenario? Strange. Most of us don't think in those terms. Because we take the Chumash and the Torah itself in a very literal way, and we assume that in some strange way, the way it's happened is the way it was supposed to happen. But is that true? Adam was given a choice. God said, don't eat from this tree. You can eat from the other tree. But don't eat from the tree of Nawat, of knowledge of good and evil. I don't want to eat from that tree. Now, I'm not going to go into the story of Adam Rishon or what exactly was going on. You see, that's not what we're going to go involved in here. But what I will say is a very important thing. And this is the thing. Did Adam have choice or not? Was he a free man or wasn't he a free man? Of course he was a free man. So when the Baruch said to him, don't eat from the tree, was he joking around with Adam? Was he saying, hi, I'm telling you not to eat from it. But I've really created the pressure that you must eat from it. That's absurd. The Baruch gave Adam Rishon true free will. Did the Baruch want Adam to eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra? Of course not. Chas v'shalom. Did the Baruch want man to fall? Of course not. So therefore, what we know to be definitely true is that Adam was faced with true free will and true bechira. He could eat from the tree or not. Since Adam had true free will, right, then the story could have had two different endings. We only know of one ending, because that's the only story which is stated in the Torah. But what happens about the story with the other ending? What happens, like the thing, what if? The old what if? What if Adam had not done the chait? Where is that story written? It is not written. But the Gemara gives us a hint and an understanding of the answer to the what if. What if Adam had not sinned? So, what the Gemara says very clearly is that if Adam had not sinned, the world would have stopped right then and there. That's right. And what would have happened is that Adam would have ushered in the period called Olam Haba. Isn't that amazing? You realize the consequences of what I just said? That means all of us would never have been around. The world was created, that's right, the world was created to not, but you don't understand the consequences. Meaning, the world was created for one man and one man only. He was given a job. What was the job? The whole thing I spent the last couple of weeks talking to you about. But that job was only given to one man. God had no intention of creating more than one man in the way that we know it. And that was given to Adam Rishon. Had Adam Rishon done the job and not done the chait, then he would have brought Olam Haba into existence right then and there. What would have happened? He would have gone into Olam Haba. Where would we be? We wouldn't be in the way that we know it. We would not be. But you're all thinking, thank God he didn't make it. Because if he did make it, I wouldn't be here. That's the way to think. That's not really the way to think. Because the truth of the matter is, we were there. We were all part of Adam Rishon. Because even though this was one man whose neshama contains every neshama that was ever created after it, locked and lumped into one solid mass. We were all part of Adam Rishon. Now I'm not going to investigate what the nature of consciousness is when we're all lumped together versus what happens when we're all separated. That's not what we're here. I'm not going to do that. That's a very complex question. But fundamentally what we're saying is that Adam Rishon, had he done the mitzvah, the circumstance of the world would have been entirely different. He failed. which means that the circumstance of the world is again entirely different. That means the following, that every time we want to understand Hashkafa, we must always say the following. This idea, how does it relate to Adam having not sinned, and how does it relate to Adam by the fact that he did sin? Every time we come across a Hashkafa, every time we come across a principle, we must always say, is this idea, did this result from the sin of Adam? Or was it there before the sin of Adam? You see what I'm saying? That's a very important question. Why? For the simple reason that there were certain things that happened to the world. After Adam Rishon sinned, the nature of mankind was never again the same. Many things changed after Adam did the sin. There were a host of new things that changed that would not have existed had Adam not done the sin. If we are to understand Hashkafa in depth, we must understand which elements changed because of the sin of Adam Rishon, and which elements would have remained the same, or were part of the picture before he sinned. You see, that's the nature of our investigation. Putting it very simply, what we must understand is what was a consequence of the sin of Adam Rishon, and what was not a consequence of that sin. What is the difference? Because if something existed before the sin of Adam Rishon, it means it belongs to the concept of mankind. It means it belongs to the notion of being human. Period. It has nothing to do with the Bechira. It has nothing to do with the way Adam chose. It is an aspect of the nature of man itself. But if something happened because of the sin, it means that this somehow is connected to the sin itself. And it didn't have to be. Do we understand this?
Yes.
We will find that this concept, this analytical concept, will be used over and over and over again. And this analytical concept allows us to really peer very deeply into Hashkafa. Without it, we'd really be lost. That's the ultimate importance of this question, because the truth of the matter is, we exist in a world today, right? In a world today which has certain types of speeches. We are very far from spirituality. We have many, many things which somehow did not exist before. What we want to know, does the way the world looks today, is that because of the way the world was supposed to look? Is that what the job is all about? Or is the way the world looks today because of the way we made it look? In other words, who is responsible for what's out there? Is God responsible for what's out there in the sense that He wanted to make the world look this way because this is part of His ultimate plan and it has nothing to do with what we do? Or does the fact that the world looks the way it does have to do with the way we have acted? And in some way our sins and our deeds have literally distorted what the world has become. And that we are responsible for the nature of reality. You see, to what extent is God responsible for the nature of reality? And to what extent are we responsible for the nature of reality? Through our deeds. Now I don't mean that we actually shape reality in that sense. God shapes reality. But what I mean is, who is the cause and what is the effect? Is it God's idea that determines what this world looks like? Or is it our deeds that determine what this world looks like? And the answer to that question lies in this analytical tool. Whatever we can find in the world that existed before the Chet of Adam, before its sin, we know belongs to God's plan. But whatever now can be attributed to that which is after the sin of Adam, we now know belongs to our deeds, and that we have control over it. You see, that we compel God to act in certain ways because of our deeds. Do we understand? That's why the comparison, this list that we're going to make, is so critical. Because it tells us the true cause of what the nature of reality is. Many times people come up to me and say, where do you learn, how do you know this? This has stuff that you say. But I'll tell you, one of the ways that I know what I know is because I have access to certain analytical tools. This is one of the main tools. You see, if you do this kind of analysis, if this kind of analysis problems you, you see, you will be amazed at the rapid depth in which it begins to give you. Because you'll begin to understand what causes what. Where things come from? Who was responsible for what? And slowly it will begin to reveal to you the real structure of what is going on out there. This is one of the critical analytical tools. The world after the sin of Adam is not the same as the world before he sinned. The world after Adam sinned looked differently because the sin itself caused certain transformations. It caused certain evolution from the sin itself. If we want to understand what the nature of reality is, we have to look at those aspects of reality which are a response to the sin itself, and that which is not a response to the sin. If it is not a response to the sin, that means that it has to do basically with the ultimate plan of God in terms of how He wanted to set up the world itself. You see what I'm saying? Regardless of the way we behave. But if the concept emanates from the direct sin itself, it means that somehow we have evolved the world as a reflection of our own deeds. What we have to do to really gain a depth in our shofar is to understand which came from where. What aspects of our reality come from sin and therefore are in our hands to control, and what aspects of reality do not come from sin and therefore are beyond our control. The ultimate question here is control. Those things which cause reality to change through our deeds are subject to our control. Those things which do not come from the sin of men are beyond our control. They have to do with God's plan. You see, is that we interface with God in reality itself. And that even though the Buddhism has created a master plan, there are certain things which the Buddhism says, I am responsible for the master plan, and the evolution of reality is to some extent dependent on me. But, whether you know it or not, to some extent, the evolution of reality is also dependent on you. We must understand what aspects of reality are dependent on us, and what aspects are dependent on the Buddhism. That is the essential matter. Because that which is dependent on us, we can control, and we can do something about. The study of Adam Rishon in terms of the entire situation of Adam, before he sinned and after he sinned, and the nature of reality before and after, will give us that information. It will provide us with the clues which we need to understand really what's going on in reality. Okay, let's see. What was Adam? Did he have a neshama? Yes. Did he have a guf? Yes. Was there this conflict between apparent divinity and real divinity? Yes. All these things existed before. Did Adam Rishon have a mitzvah? Yes. God said, don't do a certain thing. So therefore, Adam Rishon was a person with the guf and neshama tied together, right? He had a mitzvah. Did he have a Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov? Yes. He had both of these things. He had all these elements before. You see. So these things are part of God's plan, and that makes sense. Well, was there a problem of Nam Nestufa? Yes. If there wasn't a problem of Nam Nestufa, there would not be a guf, there would not be a bechira, there would not be free choice. All these things are in response to the Nam Nestufa problem, which means that Nam Nestufa and all these things, guf neshama together, right? Mitzvah, Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov, mitzvah, and all these things, Yichra Mestater, Yichra Mesgala, all these things I said were part of Adam Rishon before the Chet. What we must understand is something even more fundamental than that. Everything before the Chet, that's what we're talking about now, existed for one purpose. Gan Eden, Adam, his neshama body, his Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov, the entire garden, the Nachash, all these things, right? The mitzvah, everything about Adam Rishon existed to give them the opportunity to choose between apparent divinity and real divinity. This all existed, right? Why? Because the Buddhism wanted him to earn his Olam Haba. What is that called? Mishpat. That means that essentially the Hanhoga, or the power of the Buddhism, the Shefa, or the influence that existed before the Chet of Adam Rishon in its full entirety is called the Hanogas HaMishpat. It is the Hanogas HaMishpat, which are all those series of activities which God did in order to create a situation where Adam could earn his Olam Haba. That was the prominent force which existed before the Chet. That force is based on justice, and justice alone. What happened after the Chet? Very, very different situation. Many things changed. I'm not going to go into all the different aspects of what changed. I am concerned with really one critical aspect of change that has to do with what we're talking about now. What is that? The Bereshit said to Adam Rishon, on the day that you eat the Da'af Torah, you will surely die. That's what he said. Now, since we are suddenly all of us Chachamim, I now ask you the question, is death a result of being a man, or is it the result of sin? What do you want to say? Yes. Right. You see, look how effective our formula is. Suddenly, we put our hands into the hat, and out comes a beautiful white rabbit. And the first white rabbit that comes out is the fact that we suddenly realize that to die has nothing to do with to be human. Nothing. It has to do with the fact that Adam sinned. If Adam had never sinned, he would never have died. Wait a minute. Hold on. What does it mean he would never have died? That means that Adam Rishon lived in his body and that he was supposed to live forever, even though his neshama was in a guf. That's an amazing concept. That means that when the Bereshit first put Adam Rishon into the Garden of Eden, in the Gan Eden, he never intended to take Adam's life. Never at all. You see, that means that Adam Rishon was supposed to live for all eternity, even though he was a guf, even though he was a body. Wait, we know that if Adam had not sinned, what would have happened to Adam Rishon? He would have gone to Olam Haba. Well, what would happen to the body? Obviously, he would have schlepped the body to Olam Haba with him. That's what it means, right? If Adam Rishon is not going to die, it means he's going to stay in that body. Because what is death? Death is the separation of the neshama from the guf. That's all death is. It's frightening, I realize. But simply put, that's really what it is. If that's what death is, death was not supposed to occur. That means that the creation of Olam Haba would have admitted both Adam's neshama and his guf. Adam would have sailed into Olam Haba as a full human being. That's what it means. Except that what the Bereshit simply said was the following: I give you the choice. Either create Olam Haba or don't create it. You see, that's your choice. But if you create Olam Haba, you will go into Olam Haba as a man. I'm not going to kill you, taking the neshama out and put the neshama in Olam Haba and then put the body to the ground. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to put the entire piece of you into Olam Haba. That's what it means. That means that Adam was fully human without having to die. He never knew death. It was an alien concept. It was an alien experience that has nothing to do with what God intended. God never had an intention to introduce death into the world. Not at all. Astounding, isn't it? Isn't it? But what that does, that begins to show us that we have no real understanding of what the body is. But wait a minute, that goes back to our old question. Now we're really in trouble. Because wait a minute, why does the guf go with the neshama to Olam Haba? What is it doing in Olam Haba? What's the whole function of the guf? The whole function of the guf is to what? For Yichra Mestater, is to hide the true divinity of God, right? So that the person has the option of believing in an apparent divinity. Well, once the person has finished the job, if Adam had done the mitzvah, he would not have needed guf anymore, would he? So he could dispense with the suit of clothes that he wore, and then go off into a different form like a malach. Right? That's what should have been. That's really what should have been. What does he need his body for? Why does he have to schlep his body to Olam Haba for? What good is it doing there? If the entire ability of the body is to what? It's to hide God. What good is the body in Olam Haba itself? So therefore, fundamentally, this is the most profound question that we have to ask. We see clearly, not only from the fact of transformation, that what? It's not only a problem of the fact that God will restore the life to all bodies. That's not only the problem. There's a bigger problem. What we see from the story of Adam Rishon is that the body belongs in Olam Haba within a Neshama. And that's totally ridiculous. Do we see the question here? What does it say to us? Well, this fundamentally tells us the following. We obviously do have no idea what's involved between the relationship of the Guf and the Neshama. Because if you can't answer this question, then you have no idea of who you really are. It is as simple as that. So if you thought you were confused before you entered the share, you are really confused now. You don't have to come back next week. I don't have any way to compel you to come back. Right. In other words, the only way for me to get you to come back is by some internal compulsion. And the only internal compulsion is to disturb your mental equilibrium. That's the way I know that there's a good probability of you coming back. Even then I have no guarantees. Because by the time next week rolls around, most of you will have adapted to that mental disequilibrium. But some of you will have not. And those people will be back. And that's it. The question really is, although he's not saying the form, but what's really saying is very simple. Where did Adam Rishon go? He went to Gan Eden, right? What have you all been taught about Gan Eden? Isn't Gan Eden the place where the Neshamas go after they're dead to earn a certain reward? Isn't that what Gan Eden is? So Steve is asking an excellent question, but wait a minute. If Gan Eden is a place of rewards, what is Adam Rishon doing in Gan Eden before he did anything? You see. But the premise here is that Gan Eden is a place of rewards. Therein lies the answer. Gan Eden has nothing to do with rewards. No, yes. That's, I'm rephrasing it, but that's the premise of what he's saying, which is very good. The answer is that Gan Eden has nothing to do with rewards. Nothing. Always Olam Haba. What is the true purpose of Gan Eden? We will understand that after we understand what the true purpose of Kriyas HaMesim is. One hinges on the other, but that's a very good question. Yes.
I think it's a kind of determinist question, but I'm very curious about Chava. Because, if Adam Rishon, the collective Neshama, the faith happening after Chava was already on the scene.
Yes.
What was the mitzvah, and what...
They were both given the same mitzvah.
Okay, so they both had the same mitzvah. So, how does the collective Neshama work in Adam and Chava if there are two entities now?
Both were the collective Neshamas, all males and females, would ever be born.
So when we're talking about the faith of Adam...
And I don't want to be chauvinist, but it was Chava. That's the problem. Okay.
Because Adam was, right? So...
I know.
Does that mean the Neshama does...
Now I want you to know a very interesting thing. I just with this. I'm really pointing here. I'm really showing it. But I want you to know that even though this sounds like a thing, there's a very, very big thing over here. And I'll just take 3 minutes just to, as an aside, you want to hear this? Aside? Okay, as an aside, since you bring it up, because I don't know when I'll get to it again, it's in an advanced share, but I just want to say this. How did sin actually materialize? How did it materialize? Right? Well, very simple. Chava went ahead and she fell first, and then she ran over her husband, and she got him to join the party. Now, did it have to happen that way? Well, the first question that we said, first of all, did Adam have to sin? The answer is no. But once he sinned, did it have to transpire that way? No. There were 5 different types of possibilities. What am I talking about? 1, Chava could have sinned alone, and that would be the end of it. Adam would have said, get lost. It's your tough left. You're out of it. One possibility. Second possibility, Adam could have turned around and sinned, and Chava could have told him to get lost. So each one could have sinned alone. Right? Okay, we have one possibility of Chava alone, right? Chava alone. The other possibility is Adam alone, right? Okay, let's go on. What's another possibility? Come on, another possibility.
Adam first.
Who?
Adam first.
Okay, the other possibility, Adam could have sinned first, and then he could have seduced his wife. Okay, so the next possibility is Adam first, right? Who's number one, and then Chava is number two. But in that case, they both would have done it, but Adam goes first. The next possibility is what actually happens with what? What? Which is Chava first, right? And then Adam second, right? And there's a fifth last possibility. What? No, neither sin is not a possibility. We're talking about in the positive sin. There's a sixth option that they wouldn't have sin, but I'm not sure. What? Yes, that's it. They could have sinned separately. You know, Adam and Chava could have had the bright idea on their own. Not from each other. Adam and Chava, right? But separately. Very good. There are 5 different ways that it could happen. We call that the structure of the chet. Because we see that it's not only the fact that they sinned, but the sin has a certain structure to it. Now, you may say, what's the difference? Right? At least, I can see there's a big difference between Chava alone and Adam alone. I can see that. But what's the difference between Adam first, Chava second, Chava first, Adam second, Chava, Adam separately? What's the difference? There's a vast difference. Our world looks the way it does because this was what happened. Had this happened, or that, or this world would look entirely different. Right? It's astounding, isn't it? It is astounding because when the Rebbeinu said, my world is built on justice, there's an incredible littleness about that. It means that exactly what you do, that will determine the structure of reality. It's not only the fact that you will sin that will determine to some extent the nature of reality, but the very structure of your sin will determine the structure of the reality on an exact quid pro quo basis. You see. Now, you may say to me, what am I talking about? This itself is a complete different study. I am not going to go into this because obviously it is a shear itself, and it is an advanced shear. Because to understand this, you first must understand why was there Adam and why was there Chava? Why were there 2 people? Why did God do that? Period. Why is there male and female? That is a separate question. But that first must be understood before you understand the structure. But I'll tell you this simply, one of the answers that lie this way. Okay? And the answer which we'll discuss is simply this. Let's take this versus this. Okay? Versus that. These 3. Because this fundamental thing is that both Adam and Chava did sin. Okay? So we're going to erase these 2 here. What's the difference between which way it works out? It's all both sinning. What's the difference? Okay. Let's take Adam and Chava alone. Let's say they would have done it alone. If they would have done it alone, it means that each one would have destroyed a certain aspect of what? Of their own personality individually. Okay? What was affected between these 2 that was not affected between this? What exists here that's not affected here? What in addition was destroyed here, which was not destroyed over there? Who? Very good. Relationship. In other words, had Adam and Chava sinned separately, then the punishment they would have had would have been meted out separately. But once Adam sinned, or rather Chava sinned, and then she seduced Adam, what Chava did was she not only destroyed herself and Adam in that process, but what happened was that the punishment that would be meted out to them would not only come on them individually, but would come through their relationship. The origin of all marriage problems started at that point. No. Had they sinned this way, there would never have been a marriage problem. Adam would have had his own source, Chava would have had her own source, but you would never have had a marriage problem.
What is the problem?
What? Whatever it is.
What specifically is the problem?
Other women, if this thing,
No, I mean, what is
not
the man
problem,
from? What is here's the problem that came out of it. What is
that
the
when the
problem?
Punisher wants to punish mankind, he now punishes not only separately, but he punishes them in their relationship together. That's what it means. Because essentially the sin was done through their relationship. Now, the final question. We now understand the difference between these two and that. What's the difference between this and that? What's the difference between who goes first?
Who's boss over who? Who's boss over who?
Well, what was one of the things that happened because of the sin? The Bereshit said, he cursed Chava. He punished Chava in a separate way. He said that not only are you two male and female, and therefore physiologically and spiritually you have two different functions, you see, and the functions, I'm not going to go into that, basically what that is, but you have two different spiritual functions, but more than that, there's a certain ingredient on the sense of personality that they both have. A man has a certain type of personality based on a masculine aspect, and a woman has a certain personality based on a female aspect, and don't bother me with your what? Feminine, female lives, okay? I don't leave that go. What is essentially true is that what you had in male and female before the Chet of Adam Rishon were two equal partners. Equal in terms of inner strength, but unequal in purpose. It's not relevant what purpose is, but they were equal as far as personality is concerned. Man was not stronger than woman, nor vice versa. And I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about mentally and emotionally. They were equal. The Chet of Adam Rishon, because of the fact that Chava did it first, and she seduced Adam, therefore she dragged Adam down. You see, the fate that was punished was that she was put in the exact category. She was put down. And her punishment was that there would be a certain peculiar feature in her personality which would always look to the man as a source of strength in certain ways. Now again, I'm not going to go into all the manifestations because women will argue with it, whatever the story is and so on and so forth. But fundamentally, it is built inside the woman, and it is a color, it is a punishment that a woman in many ways sees her objective or her real emotional fulfillment in terms of what she can do for a man. Whereas the man sees his fulfillment in terms of what he can do for the world. Now, you may argue or not, and I will not go into the point. We won't go into the defenses to this, or everything that woman has been instructed to defend against this, and whatever the story is. But fundamentally, this is the klala of Chava. Chava received an additional punishment that Adam did not have, because of the fact that not only they both sinned, but that she seduced Adam. There are other consequences to that. But one of the things is the fact that the construction of our personality, you see, to a certain extent is built on the man. And the Torah says, when the Torah says, your desire will be towards your husband. When the Torah says that, that doesn't mean that the Rebbe Shem is just saying this and that's the end of it. He built it into the very fabric of what it means to be a woman after the Chet. You see, that a woman in a true healthy mode must think of her husband in terms of her own fulfillment. No matter what extent she wants to ignore it, or she wants to defy it, or she wants to rebel against it, it is part of being a healthy woman. Whereas a man does not have to necessarily think in those terms in terms of a woman. Now, that comes from Chava. Now, had the Chet been the other way, had Adam done the Chet first, and he would have seduced Chava, it would have been reversed. You see. So, all we're saying here is that to a large extent, the nature of what it means to be a person, in terms of literally how you relate to another person, to the other person, man, woman, and now how they relate to themselves depends on what the structure of that Chet was. So I'm just bringing in a small example, you see, how so specific that this tool that I said before, when I said to you this important analytical tool of always saying, wait a minute, Was this before the Chet, or was this after the Chet? I'm trying to give you one example of how precise I'm talking about. That's the very structure of the Chet itself. It tells us to a large extent of what the nature of mankind is after the Chet in very, very profound ways. Yes, now I want to hear the roar come from the woman section. Okay.
Question I have is like,
What relationship between Adam and us? Why do we have to deal with the stuff that he left behind? Because one of the main consequences of Chet is the notion of fragmentation. What it is that when a generation, or Adam in this case, fails to do what he does, one of the most important consequences of Chet is that the neshama is then split and is born again in different people in the next generation in pieces. So that all these people have to do together or collectively what that one individual was supposed to do before. You see what I'm saying? And that's the way it is from generation to generation to generation. So that the sum total of all the people of mankind today are in some way connected to all the people from generation to generation. All humanity is one collective entity. Do you understand? Now there are many great questions to this. I'm not going to, what does this have to do about the nature of human consciousness, about the notion of individuality? I mean, who am I? All I'm saying is, that's where it starts, but once that neshama is fragmented, then each one becomes an individual forever. There is no re-emergence. It only goes one way. Yes?
Weren't the situations reversed? The golden calf, let's say?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a fixing for the women?
Yes.
Reversal?
They were both. Oh, you mean why wasn't so? Why the structure of that case and that thing?
Didn't things shift the other way?
One of the best questions I've heard. What do you progressive?
Wheaties.
What?
Wheaties.
Wheaties? Is that what's in it? Order me a cake. No. The question that's really been asked is something else. And basically the question is the following. Is that the truth of the matter is that when the Jews got to the Torah and the Midbar, after they got out of Egypt, they had just about fixed up what the Chet of Adam was, which means that they had restored that original damage. Now the damage that was done after was based on a whole different situation, you see. Which means that the structure of what's called the critical Chet, you see, was now different, you see, which is true. The answer is that the way reality looks out there now is no longer entirely a result of what Adam did. That is true. It is much more a result of the sin of the golden calf. But since they never fully rectified what Adam did, they almost, but not quite fully did, the vestige of the Chet of Adam and Rishon still remains with us. But in large measure, a great deal of the structure of our reality out there has to do with the structure of the sin of the golden calf. What was the sin of the golden calf? That's up ahead. Series 3, tape,
well,
whatever.
when the women didn't get to the golden calf,
No.
they make a little bit correction, right?
That's it. No, right, the structure's changed, but we're not going to go into details of that change. We should remember